Hi, this is the voice of Heidie Calero with an economic capsule, this time regarding inflation, but in the US. The June CPI figures were just published and they are staggering, 9.1%, with gasoline 60%. Puerto Rico's CPI has not been published yet for June, but I would not be surprised if the same trend continues upward. So let's just look at what happens in terms of the US and what does it entail, because those reverberations will also take place in Puerto Rico. So the first graph I am depicting here is back to 1981 inflation. Yes, the highest price levels in the US in 40 years. The blue line that you see there is the CPI in the United States, and it's from June 1981. You may recall this was the time of the second oil shock. It was the Iranian revolution, and that really caused a lot of problems. Iran represented at that time like 7% of world oil production. That was halted. There were strikes. And so the world again was hurled into the second oil shock following the 1974-75 first oil shock. So as you can see there, back in June of 1981, the CPI in the States was 9.6%. Today, as of June 2022, it's 9.1%. In between, as you see there in the graph, there was sort of a relative stability in prices, which were good, not only in terms of real wages, but in terms of people feeling content, complacent, that prices were not rising as much. Then, of course, we had COVID, and we had all this opening up of the economies, all the problems with the supply chain distribution. And so now there are a lot of dollars chasing few products and services. And so I think it's going to get higher before it starts going downwards. Let's look at the graph parallel, even though we do not have the figures for June yet for Puerto Rico, but let's look at what happened back in 1981, which also Puerto Rico was impacted by that second oil shock, and it caused the recession in 82, 83, and even part of fiscal year 84. Negative growth rates, well, the inflation skidded to 10.3%, as you see there, and that was back in June of 1981. It also increased again as of 2006, and now as of May of 2022, as you see there in the graph, it's about 6.4%. So overall, inflation prices rising. Now, where is it rising the most? Highest inflation in US is in gasoline, and it's the same thing here in Puerto Rico, as you see in this graph, which depicts some of the components of the consumer price index. This is in the US. At the top, it's the average CPI of 9.1%. Gasoline, since last year, it's almost 60%. Every time I go to the gas pump and I say, how come? You know, I used to fill the tank of my car with maybe $45. Now it's only half the tank. And I feel the same pain that everybody else is feeling in terms of the gasoline prices. But it's also food. Food here is 10% in the US. And there are some components like eggs, chicken, cereal, baby food that are rising at double digits again. Part of that, it's not only the opening up of the economy with an opening up of demand, chasing few goods that are available because of these chain supply distribution dislocations, with China closing again many of its ports because of COVID. And then, of course, as of February of this year, with the Russia-Ukraine war. Remember that Ukraine is one of the cereals of wheat baskets of the world, as well as for some of the gas in Ukraine, and even for the oils. So it's important. And the same thing for Russia. Russia is a world producer of oil, and of course, because of this war and all the NATO countries trying to strangle many of the Europeans and the US as well, inflicting a lot of pain. And it doesn't seem that there's going to be a short end in sight for this end of the war. We don't know when it will happen. It's a black swan, and black swans are events that are random. We cannot predict them. They cause a lot of pain. They have enough consequences, be it positive or negative, and then only after the fact, in retrospect, they were foreseeable. Well, this black swan is really not going away anytime soon. The other components is housing, and that also is more sticky because there is not enough construction of housing. Same thing here in Puerto Rico. Mortgage rates are going up, and so people who cannot buy the houses because either they are not available, affordable houses in the market, or because mortgage rates now are escalating and they cannot qualify, now they are moving on to rent. Well, rent is also rising, and you see there, even though it's 6%, rentals are rising, and they're going to be more sticky. Maybe gasoline and food may go down more quickly once things start resolving, or it starts to become alleviated with some of the world events. But rental and housing prices are going to be more sticky. Apparel, medical care services, and even recreational services, all related to services, they are also going up, as you see there. The next graph is sort of this big glimpse at what's happening with the financial markets. We see the fear of recession in the Dow Jones. As you see there in this graph, as of January, July of 2022, it's been going down 17.5%. And that is as inflation. We can correlate this. Why? Because the markets already anticipate that the Federal Reserve, that is in charge of monetary policy, will continue to escalate interest rates, and the fear of recession, if it goes up too quickly in terms of tightening those interest rates, it could really choke the economy, an economy that is still strong in the US. And you cannot imagine how many billions of dollars in wealth because of this market crash we have been seeing. So negative 17.5%. And the last graph also depicts what happened back in 1981, again, when inflation went up to almost 14%. Still not as high as now, but even the Dow Jones nosedived again to 14.6%. So as you see there, it's complicated. We cannot just sit in our behinds saying, well, as the Secretary of Economic Development in Puerto Rico said, Puerto Rico can really do very little to insulate us from the impact. Mr. Secretary, that could be true, but there are many things that Puerto Rico can do. The legislature can really take a good look at legislation, taxes that are really taking money out of our pockets. Well, at least on a temporary basis, what to do that? Why not really audit and fiscalize more and ask for accountability for the electrical grid? What's happening there? What's happening with housing? Why is it that everything takes so long? No, Mr. Secretary of Economic Development, Puerto Rico can do things. I think this is a call to action. Don't forget, those of you who like our economic capsules, to subscribe to YouTube in the voice of Heidie Calero, and to give us a like. And don't forget, the economy is all of us. Thank you.